So each of these three action cameras here were released in 2022. It's now 2023, and I've owned each of these for several months and put each of them through thousands and thousands of hours of testing. And today it's time to determine which one of these action cameras is best. So the three action cameras I have here, first of all, the DJI Action 3. Second, I have the GoPro Hero 11 Black. And third, I've got the Insta360 One RS 4K edition. Now the reason I picked the Insta360 One RS 4K edition because I wanted to grade a camera that is equivalent in overall functionality to these two. And that 360 functionality can be a little bit of a curveball because obviously the Action 3 and the Hero 11 do not have the 360 functionality. So that is why I chose the 4K edition of this, and I've used the 4K edition a lot. Now something important for you to know right up front is I bought all three of these action cameras with my own money, and a couple of these I've bought many of them. Like this Action 3 right here, I've bought 3 or 4 of these now. In addition to me buying each of these cameras with my own money, I also have no affiliation with any of these companies. This video today is both my opinions and some facts about these cameras. So for the point system today, I'm going to keep a running total at the bottom, and the winner in each category is going to get 3 points. The second place will get 2, and the third place will get 1. So I'm going to tell you right now up front which one of these 3 cameras won. And the camera that is the winner is the GoPro Hero 11. So you don't have to fast forward to the end of the video now to find out, I've told you. So now I'm going to talk about why the GoPro Hero 11 took first place for the best action camera of 2023 and where each of these cameras ended up relative to the Hero 11. First of all, let's talk about cost. The DJI Action 3 costs $329 new. The GoPro Hero 11 cost $499 new, but if you're a GoPro subscriber, the Hero 11 only costs $399, but if you're not a GoPro subscriber, it does cost $50 per year. So if you sign up for $50 to save the $100, then the Hero 11 would end up costing you $449 new. And the Insta360 One RS 4K edition new costs $299. Now it's important to note that is the pricing of these when these came out new in 2022. All of these companies run sales, and some of the pricing does get reduced over time. So when you watch this video, the pricing may have changed on some of these, but that was the brand new pricing when these were released. So based on that pricing, the Insta360 One RS is our winner, the Action 3 is second, and the GoPro is third. Next, let's talk about camera weight. So what I did is I weighed each of these cameras without the little mount on the bottom here attached, but I did weigh the Action 3 and the One RS with the cases on that come with them, because without the case on, you're not able to mount these cameras. With the GoPro, you don't need a case to mount it. There's 2 little feet that tuck under that fold down. And I did also weigh them with the battery inserted and the micro SD card inserted. The Action 3 weighs 188 grams, the Hero 11 weighs 156 grams, and the Insta360 One RS weighs 160 grams. So our winner in this category is the Hero 11. It is the lightest of these 3. The Insta360 comes in second, and the Action 3 comes in third. Item number 3 is battery capacity. Obviously, having a battery that will give you the longest life from a charge is a really important feature on any action camera. You don't want to be caught out there in the middle of an adventure with your battery running out quickly on you. So each of these batteries has a different milliamp hour of charge that they can hold, but that doesn't always translate to the most runtime. So for this feature, I did look at how much charge each battery can hold, but I also looked at how long each action camera can go in various filming modes. And here are the results for that. First of all, the GoPro battery can do 1720 milliamp hours of charge, and this translates to 4K 60 for about 70 minutes, 4K 30 for about 88 minutes, and 1080-30 for about 137 minutes. The Action 3 battery can hold 1770 milliamp hours of charge, and it can do 4K 60 for about 75 minutes. 4K 30, there was no data available from DJI, but I would expect this to be a couple minutes longer than the GoPro due to the other frame rates and resolutions being a couple minutes higher than the GoPro as well. And the DJI can do 1080p 30 for about 160 minutes. The Insta360 battery holds 1445 milliamp hours. It can do 4K 60 for about 75 minutes, and there's no data available for the others, but it's reasonable to conclude those will be around the same, proportionate to that battery. Now, it is important to note that each manufacturer specifies different features like screen brightness combined with that, if you have the Wi-Fi turned on or not, what level of stabilization you use. There's so many factors that can affect how much runtime you get out of each battery. So in this case, I'm going to declare the Action 3 the winner, the Insta360 One RS second, and the GoPro Hero 11 third. But again, all of them are very close to each other. They're only a couple minutes apart on that 4K 60 mode. So in general, you can expect approximately the same battery life from these. And of course, temperature that you're operating the camera in can also affect the battery life. And we're going to get into that a little bit later with how well these do in cold weather. Next, let's talk about size and body design. So we already talked about the weight of these, but let's look at the actual size. So if you were to hold these next to each other, what is the actual size of these cameras relative to the other? What I have here is I have all the cases on them because the cases for these two are needed in order to mount them. And in general, most people don't just carry around the Action camera like this. Typically, you're going to have it mounted on something to carry it around for filming. So when you line these up next to each other with everything on that enables you to mount them, the GoPro comes out a little bit smaller than the other two, but when it comes to thickness, the GoPro is about the same thickness as these other two with the case on, but the GoPro is the least bulky when it comes to the Action camera being able to be mounted for use. So in this case, the GoPro is the winner, the One RS is second, and the Action 3 is third. And like I said earlier, the nice thing about the GoPro is you don't have to put it in any case to mount it. All you have to do here is pull down the feet when you're ready to mount it. And if you're not mounting it to anything and you're carrying it, the feet tuck away nicely like that. Love that about the GoPro design. It makes it a lot less bulkier, and it's really nice to have that. Then you don't have that case to worry about forgetting or losing. Everything is right here. Next, let's talk about menus on these cameras. What I mean by menus is I'm looking at usability, how easy they are to use, how stuff is structured and organized, the various settings, and how many clicks you have to make to change those settings. How much toggling and dragging back and forth and up and down and tapping on weird parts of the screen. How much of that do you have to do on each of these cameras? So I find that menu preferences are something that is a little bit of a preference and is not exactly objective, but in my somewhat objective, somewhat subjective opinion, I like the menus on the GoPro Hero 11 best because everything is right there structured under that parent video, photo, or time-lapse menu. You only have to go to each one of those and then all your presets are there. You can save them all. They're really easy to go through, navigate through, and figure out which one you're going to use right away. These other cameras do have their own systems of dragging sideways to get to different modes. And I do like it that the Insta360 is very specific on that. It has stuff kind of divided up into its own modes, which is great. You can save presets on here, which is also great. DJI is the same way. DJI has fewer options when dragging from side to side, and you can also save presets on here as well. But overall, I find the GoPro is quickest and easiest to use to get to the settings that I want, sometimes on a short notice. So the winner for this is the Hero 11, the Action 3 is second, and the Insta360 One RS is third. Next, let's talk about the smartphone apps that each of these cameras have. The Hero 11 has the GoPro Quick app, the DJI has the DJI Mimo app, and the Insta360 has the Insta360 app. Now, of these three cameras, I do like the Quick app with the Hero 11 and the DJI Mimo app best with the Action 3. I find those apps are both the most refined, and they have the most options and ease of use when editing. Now, the app can be used to push firmware to all three of these, which is great as well, and that's a nice feature to have. It can be a little bit buggy though, getting the Bluetooth paired and then the Wi-Fi paired to push the firmware. I find that all of these I've had to remap that a couple times to get it to work successfully. In addition, the app allows you to edit footage with each of these, When it comes to editing, I like the Quick app best. I think that app is most refined. It's got a lot of great options on there. It is important to note that some of the features are paid. You do have to be a GoPro subscriber to do certain things on the Quick app, whereas with the DJI Mimo and the Insta360 app, there is no cost for any of those features. All of the features are free. For apps, the Hero 11 gets first place, the Action 3 gets second, and the Insta360 One RS gets third. And speaking of firmware updates, next let's talk about which of these cameras offer the highest resolution and frame rate. So with the GoPro Hero 11, you can get 5.3K 60 out of this camera. With the DJI Osmo Action 3, you can get 4K 120 max. And on the Insta360 One RS 4K edition, you can get 4K 60, but you can also get 6K 24. But the 6K 24 is that widescreen mode where you have the black bars on the top and the bottom. So in this case, I think there should be a little bit of an asterisk there because that's not in the common 16:9 or 4:3. So that is important to note. So if you're looking at just 4:3 or 16:9, then this one can do 4K 60. So if we're talking about 4:3, 16:9 only, the Hero 11's the winner, the Action 3 gets second, and the Insta360 One RS gets third. Next, let's talk about the maximum video bitrate you can get out of each of these cameras. Bitrate does not necessarily guarantee better footage if it's higher, but when there's a higher bitrate, your footage can often have more detail in there, and it'll often tend to look better. There's usually a greater chance that there's going to be more detail available for you to bring out later on when editing. The highest bitrate on the Hero 11 is 120 megabits per second, but it is worth noting if you have installed the GoPro Labs firmware, it is possible to max out the bitrate at 200 megabits per second. But for the sake of this measurement, I'm going to talk about the standard firmware, and the GoPro Hero 11 does offer up to 120 megabits per second on that. The Action 3 offers all the way up to 130 megabits per second, and the Insta360 One RS offers up to 100 megabits per second. So based on this, the Action 3 is the winner, the Hero 11 gets second, and the Insta360 One RS gets third. Next, let's talk about photo megapixels and photo quality. The Action 3 offers 12 megapixel photos, the Hero 11 offers 27 megapixel photos, and the Insta360 One RS offers 48 megapixel photos. Now, megapixels are not everything. It's important to note that. But in general, megapixels are going to give you more flexibility when editing later on, especially if you want to crop that photo in. With higher megapixels, it's generally going to still hold up and look pretty good when you crop it in. In addition, if you wanted to ever print a photo out that you took with these, the one with the higher megapixels is going to generally offer you the larger option. So if you want to print a larger photo, generally you'll be able to do that with higher megapixels. So when we take a look at the photos that I took on each of these cameras side by side, I like how the photo from the Insta360 looks best. So the One RS is the winner for this, the Hero 11 is second, and the Action 3 is third. Next, let's talk about time-lapse capabilities. So if you've been around my channel for long, you know that I love shooting time lapses. I love doing it with action cameras too, because these are so versatile, they're small, and I don't have to worry about them getting rained on because they are waterproof, as long as all the doors and secret hatches and everything are closed on these cameras. So when it comes to time-lapse options, you do have video or photo mode available on all three of these. On the DJI, you can do a time-lapse up to 4K resolution in video mode, and also you can do up to 12 megapixel photos raw in photo mode. On the Hero 11, you can do up to 5.3K resolution time-lapse in video mode, and you can do 27 megapixel raw photos in photo mode. And on the Insta360 One RS, you can do up to 4K in video mode, and you can do up to 48 megapixel raw photos, which does make it possible to do an 8K time-lapse on the One RS. But megapixels and resolution are not everything. When I filmed time-lapses on these three cameras, there were two clear winners here that tied. The Hero 11 and the One RS both had quite good looking time-lapses, and the One RS has the advantage of being able to go to a higher resolution for the time-lapse. Therefore, in this case, I'm declaring a tie for the One RS and the Hero 11. I gave them both 2 points. In the Action 3, I gave 1.2. The time-lapses in the Action 3 do not have the same level of detail as these two cameras, and detail does matter a lot with time-lapses, especially when you want to crop those and do different zooming or moving in those, you want to have as much detail as possible to work with. Speaking of time lapses, let's talk about night lapse capabilities on each of these. So night lapses I really enjoy because there's an extra challenge to getting a good night lapse. Oftentimes it takes having a dark enough sky. That's an important first aspect. But at the same time, you need a camera that will be sensitive enough to capture those details in the sky. Now with night lapses, these cameras can do all of the same video and photo resolutions, so I won't go through those again. But when you look at the actual results, there is a clear winner for night lapses, and it is the Hero 11. In addition, the Hero 11 also has some other really cool night modes. You can do star lapse mode built into this camera, which can save hours and hours of time, and the results look really good. You also can do light trails and vehicle trails. Those are both built into the Hero 11 as well, and those are really neat modes. The Insta360 One RS, I gave second place. The night lapses on those do capture the second best detail behind the Hero 11. There's not as many details, but there are still a good bit of details. The Action 3, if you want to do night lapses, I really cannot recommend it. I have tried so many different settings on the Action 3 in video mode and photo mode, and it will only capture the few brightest objects in the sky. And I've had these cameras side by side, and the amount of detail they capture is a night and day difference. The Hero 11 is definitely the king of night lapses when it comes to action cameras. Since we're on the topic of lapses, let's talk about the hyperlapse capabilities of each of these cameras. Now, a hyperlapse is also known as a motion time lapse, and each of these cameras have their own terminologies to describe a hyperlapse. All three of these cameras do the motion time lapses pretty well, but when it comes to resolution offered, the Hero 11 does offer motion time lapses in 5.3K, but both of these cameras can only do up to 4K. Therefore, the Hero 11 is the winner with 3 points, and each of these get 2. And the fact that the Hero 11 can do 5.3K does show in the final results there is a lot more detail there versus the 4K ones from these cameras. Next, let's switch gears and talk about audio quality in these cameras. Now, I've done a lot of mic testing with each of these, and if it's not a windy day out and you're not in a noisy environment like by an ocean with loud waves, each of these cameras can get you pretty decent audio. It's nothing great though. I can't recommend the built-in mic if you want professional good audio. If you're going to be doing a lot of audio with these cameras where you're talking to them, I do recommend getting an external mic of some kind that you can use to record your audio. So when it comes to built-in audio in these cameras, I'm going to give all three of them a 1. But if you want great audio to go with your great video, then I recommend getting some type of wireless mic like this set right here. With most wireless mics, they'll have a USB-C connector here that you can plug into the cameras. All of these cameras do support that, but with the Hero 11, you do have to have it in the media mod for that connectivity. You can also use the 3.5 jack on the back of the media mod, and there's also the USB-C. So options like the DJI wireless mic you can use, or you can even get a more budget-friendly one like this one from Ulanzi. It'll still get you better audio than the built-in mics on here, so I recommend doing that. Next, let's talk about the waterproof capabilities of each of these cameras. Now, all of these cameras are able to be submerged in water, but how deep you can go is the question. And of course, each manufacturer does make it clear that you need to make sure all doors are installed and closed on these, and that the lens covers are all tight so that water doesn't get in behind them. And one of them, Insta360, does say you need to have it in the case, which makes sense because this is a modular design where these pieces come apart. So if you didn't have it in the case, there would probably be the risk of those components falling apart. And this case does cover some critical areas on here. And the depth is the depth that these cameras can go with whatever came with them without getting a special secondary case, which can allow it to go deeper. So the Action 3 can go 16 meters or 52 feet underwater and still be waterproof. The Hero 11 can go 10 meters or about 33 feet, and the Insta360 can go 5 meters or about 16 feet. So if you're gonna be going any deeper than 52 feet, you would need a case for the Action 3. If you're going deeper than 33 feet, you need a case for the Hero 11. If you're going deeper than 16 feet, you need a case for the One RS. So in this case, the Action 3 is the winner, the Hero 11 gets second, and the One RS gets third. Next, let's talk about the cold weather performance with the battery in each of these cameras. Now, both the Hero 11 and the Action 3 do have batteries that are supposed to perform well below freezing. The Hero 11 has the Enduro battery included with it now, and GoPro states this battery should perform as normal all the way down to 14 degrees Fahrenheit or about -10 degrees Celsius. DJI says their battery should perform normally all the way down to -4 Fahrenheit, which is about -20 degrees Celsius. And Insta360 says their battery in the One RS will perform as normal to -4 Fahrenheit, -20 Celsius. Now, I've used each of these cameras in the cold, and the One RS does drain quickly in the cold. That is true. These two batteries do really well in the cold, and they drain about as normal in the cold. And even though GoPro says this battery is good down to 14 Fahrenheit, I've used it colder than that, and I don't feel like it's drained much faster than at 14 degrees Fahrenheit. But in this case, I'm going to give Action 3 first place, the Hero 11 second place, and the One RS third place for cold weather performance. Let's talk about displays on these cameras. So the Hero 11 and the Action 3, they both have rear displays that are basically identical in size. The Action 3 has a little more border around it, and then they both have front displays, which are also similar in size. One difference worth noting is the Action 3, the front display is touch, where there's some limited options on it. The Hero 11 front display is not touch. And the One RS, of course, does not have a front display, and it has a relatively small rear display. In this case, the Action 3 is the winner because it has comparable display size to the GoPro, but it also has that front touch display. The Hero 11 is second, and the One RS is third. Next, let's talk about lens covers. Lens covers can and do get damaged. It doesn't take much to damage it. You could drop it once and it can get scratched. And when it does get scratched, you often will have to replace it. Otherwise, it will degrade the quality of your footage. The nice thing about the Hero 11 and the Action 3 is they do both have removable display covers. The One RS does not have a removable display cover though. So if you crack or break this, you have to buy the entire new lens module. So the One RS automatically loses because of that in this category. Now let's talk about the lens cover on these two. Both of them have a replaceable removable lens cover, and both of them have a lens cover that costs $20 to replace. When it comes to removing it in the Action 3, all you have to do is twist counterclockwise, and it comes off quite easily. And all you have to do is go clockwise to put it back on. There's nice threads to line it up with. On the Hero 11, you do have to pull out pretty hard on this, and then you have to turn it about a quarter turn while pulling out, and then it pops off. And then when you replace it, you put it back on kind of diagonal here while pushing down and twist, and it pops back into place. So price-wise, the lens cover does cost the same on the Action 3 and the Hero 11, but for ease of replacing the lens cover, the winner is the Action 3. I think it's a little bit easier and more consistent to take it off counterclockwise and put it back on clockwise. So Action 3 wins, Hero 11 gets second, and One RS gets third because you can't replace the lens cover on that. Next, let's talk about button placement on these cameras. All three cameras do have a record button on top, which is pretty easy to get to. It's generally close to the right side on these. The Action 3 has the power on button on the side, and the GoPro has it on the side a little bit lower down, but the One RS has it on top. So when it comes to the usability of that, I can understand the convenience of having the power button on top here, but I think it's better ergonomics to have it on the side here. And I do like where DJI put the power button along the top here. I feel like it's more natural for the thumb to be able to hit it there, versus on the GoPro, it's a little more toward the center or the bottom. And I also like how the button action feels on the Action 3. It's a little bit better there when you press it. There's not quite as much mushiness to it, so I do like that. So in this case, for the button placement and the feel of the buttons, I give the Action 3 first place, Hero 11 second, and One RS third. Let's talk about where the battery, the micro SD card, and the USB-C cable go on each of these cameras. So in the Action 3, you do have a separate door for the USB-C port, which is right here below the power button. And then on the other side is the door for the battery and the micro SD card. On the Hero 11, you have everything in one place. You've got the side door here, and that opens up to the battery, the micro SD card on the side here, and the USB-C port down here on the bottom. On the Insta360 One RS, you do have this side door right here, where there's the USB-C cable and the micro SD card. They go side by side. And then of course the battery on here, it's modular. It pops onto the bottom. Take it off and you pop it on that way. And the Insta360 One RS, it has a tiny little door that's kind of awkward to take off and pop into place. You have to have it lined up just right. It does pull off entirely and it's really easy to lose. So I actually don't like that about the Insta360 One RS. With the Hero 11, I love it that everything's right here in one place. And also, you have this USB pass-through door that you can get for the Hero 11, where if you just want to be able to plug something into the USB-C port, like an external power brick, you can do that and you can still have it sealed. You don't have to have the door open. I like the Hero 11 best because it has everything in one place. So the Hero 11 is the winner here, the Action 3 is second, and the One RS is third. Speaking of micro SD cards, let's talk about the maximum micro SD card size that each of these cameras can support. And of course, do check with the manufacturer before you buy a micro SD card for your cameras, because you do need to get a card that's up to the proper speeds to keep up with the read and write speeds on these. I personally use the SanDisk Extreme cards and I love those. They have never let me down in an action camera. They work great every time. So the Action 3 can do up to 256 gigabytes. The Hero 11 can do up to 512 gigabytes. And the Insta360 One RS can do up to 1 terabyte for the micro SD card. So in this case, the One RS is the winner. The Hero 11 is second place and the Action 3 is third. Next, this is a big one, and I'm going to go through several different examples. Let's talk about the quality of the video footage from each of these cameras. If you're buying an action camera, chances are most of what you're doing with it is going to be videoing. So in this case, I'm going to do several different comparisons that I filmed with these side by side so that you can see which one has the best video footage. So the first comparison is all three of these cameras in 4K 60 in linear mode. And do note, they all have the same white balance setting, they have the same color mode setting, they have the same lens setting, in this case it's linear, and they were all at 4K 60. Next, let's do a stabilization test. I have all three of these with normal stabilization walking along. Some things to look for in stabilization is how smooth is it? Is there any jiggle or wobble in that footage? And how much of a crop does that stabilization apply? My final test here, I have stabilization set to high on each of these, as high as it will go, so that you can see how well it does with stabilizing and how much of a crop is introduced. So after looking at all of those samples, one thing I noticed right away is the Hero 11 is the winner with the most detail in the footage. There was a lot of detail there in the highlights and shadows that I do not see with the Action 3. Another negative about the Action 3 is you cannot change the sharpness settings on this camera. With the Hero 11 and the One RS, you can actually change the sharpness. You can do anywhere from low all the way up to high on both of these cameras. And the One RS has even more specific fine-tuning options for the sharpness. But that being said, the footage from the Hero 11 definitely looks best, and the Action 3 does still seem to have some type of focus issue. As I mentioned earlier, I've bought multiple cameras of the Action 3, and I bought them at different times, including this one, which is one I bought just a few weeks ago. And that focus issue, even when I have the camera back more than the minimum focal distance, the image just does not seem to have that same level of detail, and it just does not look as good as footage from the Hero 11 or the One RS, in my opinion. But overall, I like how the footage looks from the Action 3 a little bit better than the One RS. So in this case, the Hero 11 is the winner. The Action 3 and the One RS both take second place because there are different pros and cons to the footage where they kind of balance each other out when it comes to head-to-head on that. So I'm going to give them both 2 points. Next, let's look at the quality of the slow motion from these cameras. So the Action 3 and the Hero 11 can both do slow motion up to 4K 120. The One RS cannot do 4K 120. The highest slow motion it can do is 2.7K 100. And for 240 frames per second, the Hero 11 can do 2.7K 240, but these cameras cannot do 2.7K 240. You have to go all the way down to 1080p 240 on the Action 3 and 1080p 200 on the One RS. So when I look at the slow motion samples from these cameras, the Hero 11 is the clear winner. It looks the best, it's the smoothest, there's the most detail there. The Action 3 is second because it can do 4K 120, and that still looks pretty good in slow motion. And the One RS is third because it can only do 2.7K at 100. You can still upscale that 2.7K to 4K and it still looks good, but not as good as the 4K from the Hero 11 and the Action 3. Next, let's talk about the color modes available on these cameras. All three of these cameras do have 3 color modes. They have a standard mode, which is called natural or standard on these, which is supposed to be true to life when you're filming video. They also each have a higher saturation mode, which has a lot deeper saturation to the colors. And then each of them has a flat or log equivalent mode, which is meant for grading that footage later on to manually bring out the colors as you want to. Overall, each of these cameras do a great job with those color modes. In this case, I have given this to Action 3 as the winner because I like their standard color mode best with those natural colors. I feel like it's more true to life than the GoPro, which can have colors a little bit more on the yellow and the orange side, even when the same white balance is set. And also the Action 3, that D-Cinelec profile is by far the most flattest. It has the lowest saturation of any of the color modes. So I do like that about it. Second is the Hero 11. The Hero 11 does do a good job with the colors overall, and I like the flat mode available on there. But at the same time, the One RS also does a great job with their log mode, and their standard mode has colors more similar to the Action 3. So I'm going to give the One RS a tie with the Hero 11 when it comes to colors, with 2 points as well. Next, let's talk about the minimum focal distance on each of these to have your subject in focus. Now, the main reason this matters is if you're going to use these cameras for vlogging, you need to know how far back you need to hold this if you're talking to the camera. Because if you have it too close, you're going to be blurred and out of focus, and it's not going to look good at all. Your background's going to be in focus, but you will not be. So for the GoPro, the minimum focal distance is 12 inches or 30 centimeters. So you can have this about a foot away from you, and you'll probably be in focus with no problems. The Action 3, the minimum focal distance is also 12 inches or 30 centimeters. But I have found that with the Action 3, you get better results if you're at least 24 inches or 60 centimeters back. And that's a pretty good distance, especially if you're vlogging and talking to the camera. You're going to need a pretty good selfie stick to hold it out far enough away. But the Insta360 One RS also is 24 inches or 60 centimeters. So again, you're going to have to hold that out far. So in this case, the Hero 11 is the winner. The Action 3 is second, and the One RS is third. According to many people, the focus still does look weird on this and off at times on the Action 3, and I've noticed that as well. I know there's been a lot of back and forth on that, and I just feel like the focus on the Hero 11 looks great consistently. Not had any problems with that. Next, let's talk about low light performance with these cameras. Action cameras are not going to be the best with low light performance because they do have tiny sensors in there, and those sensors can only do so much in low light. That being said, the Hero 11 does look best in low light. The Action 3 is second for low light, and the One RS is third. Now the Action 3 does have a slightly larger sensor than the GoPro, but both of these sensors are larger than the One RS. That being said, the larger sensor in the Action 3, I did not find it translating to better results than the Hero 11. The Hero 11 has better looking footage in low light, and it is better exposed as well. Now let's talk about lens and aspect ratio options. The Action 3 does have a wider angle lens than the GoPro, so if you set both of these to equivalent modes, the Action 3 footage is going to be wider than the Hero 11 footage in linear, standard, and ultra wide. It's always going to be wider from the Action 3 than it is from the Hero 11. It's not a lot wider, but it is a little bit wider. So if you value that wideness and want as much out of it as you can, you'll like the Action 3 for that. But the Hero 11 offers an option the Action 3 does not. On the Hero 11, GoPro offers that 8x7 mode that you can do up to 5.3K. And the 8x7 is fabulous because if you film that, it's going to be almost square. And when you go to edit later on, you can frame your shots and not lose resolution. So you can do 9x16 with that. You can do 4x3. You can do 16x9 where you have it vertical. You can do 1x1. Basically, you can make that footage work for whatever platform you want to share it with. So that's an awesome new feature on the Hero 11. The One RS is a little more limited with the lens options. It does offer the ultra wide, the wide, the linear, and the narrow, just like these other cameras. But that is it. The aspect ratios are also limited. A lot of frame rates and resolutions, you can only do 9x16. With the Hero 11, you can do lots of aspect ratios, including in the highest modes. And with the Action 3, you can do 4x3, all the way up to 4K 60. So in this case, the Hero 11 is the winner, the Action 3 gets second, and the One RS gets third. Speaking of lenses and resolutions, let's talk about horizon lock and horizon leveling capabilities for these three cameras. Each of these cameras does offer their version of horizon lock and horizon leveling, but there is a clear winner here. On the Hero 11, you can do horizon lock all the way up to 5.3K resolution. You do have to have it in the linear lens, but you can do it, and you can rotate this camera 360 degrees, and it will maintain that horizon lock, which is incredible. You can do it up to that resolution. On the Action 3, you can only have horizon lock up to 2.7K. You can do horizon leveling in 4K, where you can pivot this by 45 degrees, but horizon lock is only available in 2.7K. On the One RS, you can do horizon lock and horizon leveling in up to 4K 30, but you can't do it in camera. You can change the setting on here, and you have to turn off flow state, but then you have to add that in post using the Insta360 app. So that is very cumbersome. It's unfortunate you can't do it in camera. So the clear winner here is the Hero 11 with first place, Action 3 is second, and One RS is third place. Speaking of stabilizing in post, let's talk about gyroscope data. So each of these cameras has a gyroscope inside them that can store data that helps with figuring out the stabilization algorithm. And on the Hero 11 and the One RS, that gyroscope data is made available as part of the footage. So later on, if you want to stabilize these in post using the respective apps from these companies or a third-party app, that gyroscope data is there. So you don't have to have hypersmooth on or flow state on in this camera. You can stabilize the footage in post without needing the EIS. And that's valuable in cases where you're using ND filters or something like that, when generally you can't have the stabilization turned on because your footage will look really bad due to the EIS needing a high enough shutter speed in order to properly stabilize that footage. And when you're using ND filters, your shutter speed is generally going to be lower. The Action 3 unfortunately does not have gyroscope data available yet. And because of that, if you use an ND filter with this and have the stabilization turned off, you're going to need a mechanical gimbal. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to stabilize this very well later on. And the footage is going to look really wobbly and jiggly, and it's going to look pretty bad. So in this case, the Hero 11 is the winner, the One RS gets second place, and the Action 3 gets third place. And finally, let's talk about the computer editing apps that each of these manufacturers have available. The Action 3 at this time does not have an app available that you can edit their footage with on a computer. There's not a computer app. They only have the DJI Mimo tablet and phone app. The Hero 11 has the GoPro Player app and the optional Real Steady add-on. The GoPro Player app is free, but if you want the Real Steady for that gyroscope stabilization later on, you do have to pay a one-time fee of $99, and it can be licensed on one computer. The Insta360 One RS does have the Insta360 Studio app that you can use on a computer, and it is completely free, including the stabilization feature. You don't have to put any money into that app. So in this case, the One RS is the winner for the computer app, the Hero 11 is second, and the Action 3 is third. So when we total up all of those numbers, the Hero 11 does end up being the clear winner based on all of these features that I talked about today. And my goal with this was to cover the features that matter most to most action camera users and to go through all of those and cover as many as I could. Now, it should of course be noted that the camera that won does cost the most, the camera that came in second costs less than the winner, and the camera that came in third costs less than either of these. So in a way, you do get what you pay for which is good. I feel like the prices are appropriate to what these cameras offer, so I do like that. Whenever I buy a new camera, whether it's an action camera or a mirrorless, a DSLR, I want to like that camera and I want to get the most out of it that I can. So with each of these cameras, I wanted to like them from the moment I first heard of them, and I do like each of them, but overall, the best action camera is the GoPro Hero 11. So I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Which action camera do you think is the best, and why? Do you agree that the Hero 11 is best, or are one of these other cameras your favorite? Let me know in the comments below.